Good morning, children. Let us begin today's class. We are on page 186 of your book, and today we will take up the topic the gross domestic product and the sectors. Remember, we are studying about the comparative development experiences of India and its neighbors, its two neighbors, Pakistan and China. We spoke about the demographic indicators, the different developmental parts each of the countries took. Today we are going to talk about the GDP and its sectors of the three countries. So we are on page 186. One of the much talked issues around the world about China is its growth of the gross domestic product. China has the second largest GDP of $19.8 trillion, whereas India's GDP is $8.07 trillion and Pakistan's GDP is around $0.94 trillion. Roughly, it is about 12% of India's GDP, and India's GDP is about 40% of China's GDP. So when we compare the GDPs of the three countries, China is leading with $19.8 trillion. And if India has to compare with China, we are about 40% of theirs, 40% of China's GDP. When we compare India and Pakistan, India has how much? $8.707 trillion, whereas Pakistan has $0.94 trillion, and that is Pakistan is about 12% of India's GDP. When many developed countries were finding it difficult to maintain a growth rate of even a 5%, China was able to maintain a near double-digit growth for one decade, as can be seen from the table 10.2. For the continuous 10 years, China was the only country which was about to, or one of the countries which were able to maintain a double-digit growth. Okay. Also notice that in the 1980s, Pakistan was ahead of India and China was having a double-digit growth and India was at the bottom. But in 2015 and 17, there has been a decline in Pakistan and China's growth rates, whereas India met with moderate increase in the growth rates. So from 2015-17 onwards, these are the two countries, their growth rate was on a decline, whereas India was having moderate increase in their growth rates. Now some scholars hold the reform processes introduced in Pakistan and the political instability over a long period as reasons behind the declining growth rate in Pakistan. So we will study in a later section which sector contributed to different growth rates in these countries. First, look at how people engaged in different sectors contribute to the gross domestic product. It was pointed out in the previous section that China and Pakistan have more proportion of urban population than India. It means that in China and Pakistan, there were more people living in urban areas, in city areas, as compared to India. Now, in China, due to the topographic and climatic conditions, the areas suitable for cultivation is relatively small. Only about 10% of its total land area is fit for its cultivation. This total cultivable area in China accounts for about 40% of the cultivable areas in India. Until the 1980s, more than 80% of the people in China were dependent on farming as their sole source of livelihood. Since then, the government encouraged the people to leave their fields and pursue other activities such as handicrafts, commerce, and transport. In 2015 and 17, with 18% of its workforce engaged in agriculture, its contribution to the GDP in China is 9%. How many people, what percentage was left into agriculture in China? Only just 18% of its population. That is 18 out of 100 people were doing agriculture. And still they were able to contribute to a 9%. Agricultural contribution in the GDP was 9%. Now in India and Pakistan, the contribution of agriculture to GDP was 17 and 25%. That means in India, 17% of the people into agriculture. In Pakistan, 25% of the people into agriculture. But the proportion of workforce that works in this sector is more in India. In Pakistan, about 42% of the people work in agriculture, whereas in India it is about 43%. So you see a good amount of our people are still engaged in agriculture, even though the contribution to agriculture from India's side is only 17%, Pakistan side is 25%. Still, there are many people who are engaged in agriculture, both in India and in Pakistan. The sectorial share of output and employment also shows that in all the three economies, the industry and the service sectors have a less proportion of workforce, but they contribute more in terms of output. So all the three countries, India, Pakistan and China, they have a less amount of people in the industries and the service sector, but still they are able to contribute more in the output of the GDP. In China, manufacturing and service sectors contribute the highest to the GDP at 43% and 48% respectively, whereas in India and Pakistan, it is the service sector which contributes the highest by more than 50% of the GDP. So you see, in the normal course of development, countries first shift their employment and output from the agriculture to the manufacturing and then to the services. So this is what is happening in China, as can be seen from table 10.4. The proportion of the workforce engaged in manufacturing in India and Pakistan were low at 24 and 27% respectively. The contribution of industries to GDP is at 30% in India and 21% in Pakistan. So in India, 30% of the GDP comes from industries, whereas only 21% comes from industries in Pakistan. Now in these countries, the shift is taking place directly to the service sector. So normally children, it was from the agriculture to the manufacturing, and from manufacturing you go on to the service sector. But here we can see a direct shift straight from agriculture into the service sector. Thus, in both India and Pakistan, the service sector is emerging as a major player of development. It contributes more to the GDP and at the same time emerges as a prospective employer. So more people are being employed in the service sector in both India and Pakistan, and they are contributing, this sector is contributing the most to the development of the GDP. If we look at the proportion of workforce in the 1980s, Pakistan was faster in shifting its workforce to service sector than India and China. In the 1980s, India, China and Pakistan employed about 17, 12 and 27% of its workforce in the service sector respectively. In 2014, it has reached the level of 34, 56 and 54% respectively. In the last 4 decades, 40 years, the growth of agricultural sector, which employs the largest proportion of workforce in all the 3 countries, has declined, become less. In the industrial sector, China has maintained a near double-digit growth rate, whereas for India and Pakistan, the growth rate has declined. In case of the service sector, China was able to raise its rate of growth during the 1980s to 2015, while India and Pakistan stagnated with its service sector growth. Thus, China's growth is mainly contributed by the manufacturing and the service sectors, and India's growth by the service sector. So, why was the GDP of China more? Because the contribution from the manufacturing and the service sector was more in China, whereas in India, it comes from the service sector. During this period, Pakistan has shown deceleration in all the 3 sectors: agriculture, manufacturing, and service sector. In all the 3 sectors, there is a deceleration. Deceleration is the opposite of acceleration. In other words, there has been a backward slide, downward slide. Indicators of human development. You might have studied about the importance of human development indicators in the lower classes and the position of many developed and developing countries. Let us look how India, China and Pakistan have performed in some of the select indicators of the human development. Look at the table 10.5. If you look at it, you will get an indication of how the human development is different in all the 3 countries. Table 10.5 shows that China is moving ahead of India and Pakistan. And this is true for many indicators like the income indicator, such as the GDP per capita, or the proportion of population below the poverty line, or the health indicators such as the mortality rates, the access to sanitation, literacy, life expectancy, or malnutrition. So China is moving much ahead of India and Pakistan when we look at these indicators. Now, Pakistan is ahead of India in reducing the proportion of people below the poverty line and also its performance in sanitation. Talking of sanitation and removing people or raising the people above poverty line, Pakistan has done better than India. But neither of these 2 countries have been able to save the women from maternal mortality. What is maternal mortality? Where the mother dies off in childbirth. In China, for 1 lakh births, only 27 women die. Whereas in India and Pakistan, about 178 and 174 women die respectively. Surprisingly, all the three countries report providing improved drinking water sources for most of its population. You will notice that for the proportion of people below the international poverty rate is $3.20 a day. India has the largest share of poor among the three countries. Find out for yourself how these differences occur. So talking about people earning at least about $3.20 a day. Comparing the three countries, the population of the poor is more in India as compared to the other two countries. In dealing with or making judgments on such questions, however, we should also note a problem while using the Human Development Indicator given above with conviction, firm belief. Conviction means belief. This occurs because these are all extremely important indicators, but these are not sufficient. Along with these, we also need what may be called liberty indicators. One such indicator has actually been added as a measure of the extent of democratic participation in the social and political decision making. But it has not been given any extra weight, much importance. Some obvious liberty indicators like measures of the extent of constitutional protection given to the rights of citizens or the extent of the constitutional protection of the independence of the judiciary and the rule of law have not even been introduced so far. Without including these, and perhaps some more, and giving them overriding importance in the list, the construction of the Human Development Index may be said to be incomplete and its usefulness limited. So what he's talking about? He says there are certain liberty indicators which are not included in the what you call Human Development Index. Talking about liberty indicators for constitutional protection. Let's see the three countries. Which country provides more constitutional protections to its citizens? A comparison will be made. Then protection, constitutional protection of the independence of judiciary. That means no political or government interference over the judiciary system. Compare the three countries and see whose judicial system is independent and things like that. These are not included in the human development. That's why he says, talking about the human development side, these are still not included. So we can more or less say that this is an incomplete, and the usefulness of this human development is not very accurate or true, because there are many differences when we talk of these what we call liberty indicators in the three countries. Development strategies and appraisal. It is common to find developmental strategies of a country as a model to others for lessons and guidance for their own development. It is particularly evident after the introduction of the reform process in different parts of the world, in order to learn from economic performance of our neighboring countries, it is necessary to have an understanding of the roots of their successes and failures. It is also necessary to distinguish between and contrast the different phases of their strategy. Though countries go through their development phases differently, let us take the initiation of reforms as a point of reference. Let's talk about initiation of reform, initiating reforms, beginning to get reforms in. We know that reforms were initiated in China in the year 1978, Pakistan in 1988, and in India in 1991. So let us briefly assess their achievements and their failures in pre and post reform periods. Why did China introduce structural reforms in the year 1978? China did not have any compulsion to introduce reforms as dictated by the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund to India and Pakistan. The new leadership at that time in China was not happy with the slow pace of growth and the lack of modernization in the Chinese economy under the Mao's rule. They felt that Mao's vision of economic development, which was based on decentralization, self-sufficiency, and shunning of foreign technology, goods and capital, had failed. Despite extensive land reforms, collectivization, the Great Leap Forward, and the other initiatives, the per capita gain output in 1978 was the same as it was in the mid 1950s. It was found that the establishment of infrastructure in the areas of education and health, land reforms, long existence of decentralized planning, and existence of small enterprises had helped positively in improving the social and the income indicators in the post-reform period. Before the introduction of reforms, there had already been massive extension of basic health services in the rural areas. Through the commune system, there was more equitable distribution of food grains. Experts also point out that each reform measure was first implemented at a smaller level and then extended onto a massive scale. So the experimentation under the decentralized governments enabled to assess the economic, social, and the political cost of successes or failures. For instance, when reforms were made in agriculture, as pointed out earlier, by handing over the plots of land to the individuals for cultivation, it brought prosperity to a vast number of poor people. It also created conditions for the subsequent phenomenal growth in the rural industries and built up a strong support base for more reforms. And scholars quote many such examples on how reform measures led to the rapid growth in China. So children understand, when we talk about China reforms in agriculture, you're aware, no? That everything was centralized. They were, all the lands were given, plots of lands were given to a group of people. They formed communities, and they were given the plots, but they were not owners of the plot. They said, you have this plot of land, you grow on it, cultivate on it, you pay us a certain amount of tax out of your income, and the rest is for you. Then they also encouraged people to set up small industries in the backyards of their homes. They encourage people to get into manufacturing, set up small businesses in the backyards of your houses. Okay, so this was the reform set up by China, okay, at a small scale, and this was the reason why these reforms led to a rapid growth in China. Now, scholars argue that in Pakistan, the reform process led to worsening of all the economic indicators. We have seen in an earlier section that compared to the 1980s, the growth rate of the GDP and its sectorial constituents have fallen in the 1990s. Talking of Pakistan, their reform process led to the worsening. What was there in the 1980s became worse in 1990s. Though the data on international poverty line for Pakistan is quite healthy, scholars using the official data of Pakistan indicate rising poverty there. The proportion of poor in the 1960s were more than 40%, which declined to 25% in the 1980s and then started to rise again in the 1990s. So the poverty line of Pakistan is much better than the three countries. Though in 1960 there was 40% poor people there, it came down to 25%. When? In 1980s. But ever since, again, it has started rising. The reasons for the slowdown of growth and the re-emergence of poverty in Pakistan's economy, as the scholars put it, are agricultural growth and food supply situation were based not on an institutionalized process of technical change, but on good harvest. When there was a good harvest, the economy was in a good condition, but when it was not, the economic indicators showed stagnation or negative trends. You will recall that India had to borrow from the IMF and the World Bank to set right its balance of payments crisis. The foreign exchange is an essential component for any country, and it's important to know how it can be earned. If a country is able to build up its foreign exchange earnings by sustainable export of manufactured goods, it need not worry. In Pakistan, most foreign exchange earnings, they came from remittances from the Pakistani workers who were in the Middle East and the exports of the highly volatile agricultural products. There were also growing dependence on foreign loans on the one hand and increasing difficulty in paying back the loans on the other hand. So when we talk about the balance of payments, India had to borrow from the World Bank, IMF, and the World Bank to set our balance of payments right. Why? Because our foreign exchange were less. Our exports were less, imports were more. So what happens when exports are more and imports are less? Exports are less and imports are more. Our foreign exchanges are going out for buying things from the foreign countries. But when exports is more, we have a chance of earning more foreign exchange. We learned that in macroeconomics as well. So he says, when the balance of payments was bad for India, we had to borrow from the IMF and the World Bank. Now, when you talk of Pakistan, their foreign exchange was coming from people who had settled or they were working abroad in the Middle East, Dubai, Saudi Arabia, and all the Gulf countries. Most of the people were working there. So they were sending back money, they were getting back foreign money from their citizens who were working abroad, as well as from the high volatile agricultural products. So this was keeping them up. Okay. So they were managing. There was also a growing dependence on foreign loans on the one hand and increasing difficulty in paying back the loans on the other hand. Now, however, during the last few years, Pakistan has recovered its economic growth and has been sustaining. In 2015 to 16, the annual plan of 2016 and 17 reports that the GDP registered a growth of 4.7%, highest when compared to the previous 8 years, while agriculture recorded a growth rate far from satisfactory level. Industrial and service sectors grew at 6.8 and 5.7% respectively. Many macroeconomic indicators also began to show stable and positive trends. Okay, so I'm running out of time here. You can please read the conclusions of this chapter. Tomorrow I will give you the question and answers of this chapter. Okay, so all of you have a nice day and be safe.